Hi everybody, a very warm welcome to our seminar in the Rylands Lunchtime Seminar Series. My name's Hannah Barker. I'm from the History Department at the University of Manchester and also the John Rylands Research Institute. I'm chairing the session today. You're joining some of us live from the John Rylands Library and me live from my home. Returning viewers will know by now that we're experimenting with a new remote presentation format in this series, which allows participants to view collection objects live and participate in discussions with researchers and curators. Our seminar today is on designing Dante in manuscript and print, strategies on the page. And before I introduce our two speakers, there's just a few things I want to mention. This event is being recorded and will be edited and made available on the John Rylands Library YouTube channel. Auto subtitles are available using your own settings. We're using a Zoom webinar format, so this means that your camera and mic is disabled on entry. At the end of the session, there'll be about 15 minutes for questions, so if you'd like to ask one, please can you add questions to the question and answer function. These will be selected by me as chair and conveyed to the panel. If you'd like to ask your question in person, once you've submitted it, please use the raise hand function and we can unmute you. We should have time to take quite a few questions and we're aiming to stop the whole session at around 1:45. You can also use the chat function for questions and comments. We'll be monitoring both chat and Q&A during the seminar. We'll send you a feedback survey afterwards. Because this is a new format, it would be great if you could complete this. So without further preamble, I'd like to introduce our two presenters today, John and Guida. Guida Armstrong is Senior Lecturer in Italian and Scientific and Digital Lead for the John Rylands Research Institute and Library. So she gets to work with both John and I on a regular basis. She's published extensively on Boccaccio, Dante, and early modern translated print cultures, and is the author of the 2013 book, The English Boccaccio. Most importantly for today, she's the curator of our current exhibition at the Rylands, Designing Dante, which if you haven't already seen, you should come and see very soon. John Hodgson is a member of the library executive team, with strategic responsibility for the development, promotion and care of the library's outstanding collection of special collections of rare books, maps, manuscripts, archives and visual collections. He's a professional archivist with over 30 years experience at the University of Manchester Library, which is incredible because he seems to be only 35. He's also a library's business partner for the university's cultural institutions. He has his own academic interests as a researcher, and these focus on the history of collections and library history. So if I can hand over to you guys, very much looking forward to this session.
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for that introduction, and thank you all for coming, our remote viewers. I also wanted to thank John actually for presenting with me today, because John is the person that basically started working with me on the collections when I first came to Manchester University. He's the person that showed me the Dante manuscripts and we taught together back when we were young. So I'm really, really happy that he's the person that will be showing the books today. As Hannah said, the context for this seminar is my exhibition Designing Dante here at the Rylands, which is open until the 1st of October. So lots of chances for you to come and visit it. This was put together for the Anno Dantesco, for the 700th anniversary of Dante's death, which was actually last year, but because of the pandemic and the building closures, it's been pushed to this year, which means that we get an extra Anno Dantesco here in Manchester. As I think probably some of you know, we have one of the world's best collections of Dante editions here. I would say actually the world's best collection. And, you know, we have all but 3 of the editions that were printed between 1472 and kind of the mid 17th century. So, you know, when it came to kind of programming this exhibition, I could have programmed it 10 times over. You know, I could have literally done 10 or 20 different exhibitions with different books. Because of the comprehensiveness of the print collections, I decided to focus on the idea of design, and that's why it's called Designing Dante, in a kind of twofold way. First of all, Dante's own design of the Christian afterlife, his world building, if you like, and then also how the poem itself has been designed on the page, in manuscript and print, but then also through other media, in images, in film, in sound. And we've got several events coming up, including one tomorrow, where we'll explore the ways in which the poem has been kind of rematerialized in different media. In the seminar today, we're going to talk about 4 spectacular books, I think, which we didn't put in the exhibition. And I've picked them as well just to kind of illustrate this theme of strategies as a page. As a researcher, I work on the material textual aspects of literary text, so book as a thing. I work on the expressive form of the book, so the information design of the page, so things like mise en page, the illustrations, the paratexts, all of those things that interplay together in order to present the poem to its readers and its audiences. So the 4 books we picked today are quite varied in their in their forms. We've got 3 manuscript and 1 printed book. And I think it's just, it's interesting to say as well that this is the 3rd exhibition on Dante in the history of this library. And all 4 of these books were included in the actual physical exhibition in the previous 2 exhibitions in 1909 and 1956. So, in a way, we're sort of reassembling aspects of the historic Dante exhibitions. Okay, I think I'll hand over to John to tell you about the actual books and where they came from.
Cheers, Guida. So, as Guida says, we have probably the best collection of certainly historical Dante texts in the world. Of the editions printed before 1700, we have all but 3. That's an incredible statistic. And I think at least one of those missing 3 is unobtainable. So we're never going to make a complete collection. They come from 3 sources. So the founder of the John Rylands Library, Enriqueta Rylands, purchased the Spencer collection of printed books in 1892. This was reckoned the finest private library in the world, certainly of printed material, and it has a really strong selection of early Italian printing. And we're going to see an example of an Italian incunable from 1477 shortly. In 1901, she bought a collection of manuscripts, handwritten items from the Earls of Crawford. And most of our most spectacular and significant medieval and early modern manuscripts from Europe are from that Crawford collection. The 25th Earl of Crawford, Lord Lindsay, actually modelled himself on the mercantile princes of Renaissance Florence. He made his money out of coal, but he was an aristocrat and wanted to recycle that commercial wealth into cultural patronage, just like the Medici of Renaissance Florence. So the manuscript we're going to look at now is actually a manuscript that belonged to the Strozzi family, another of the great Florentine families, and he purchased that in 1859. So I think he would have been particularly pleased to have acquired a manuscript which had a direct connection with one of the great families of Florence. So maybe we should have a look at that now.
I think you should handle it.
Okay. So it's in I should say, it's in a rather undistinguished 19th century binding, but when we get inside it, it is quite spectacular. This is a composite manuscript. So we have at the beginning Petrarch's Ream, and we have this magnificent illuminated opening page showing Petrarch and Laura. And here at the bottom is the Strozzi coat of arms. So this was commissioned. This wasn't an off-the-shelf production that was bought by the Strozzi family. It was commissioned by them. And we know quite a bit about the origins of this manuscript because of the colophon. So if we go to the back of the manuscript, we have the colophon in red script here, which explains that it was commissioned by Lorenzo Caroli de Strozzi. And we know that he died in 1383. So very clearly, the manuscript can't be any younger than 1383, and the scribe is called Paul. We don't know anything more about him, but it's interesting that he recorded himself in this manuscript. So here we are at the opening of Dante's Canzone, and obviously we've got this illuminated initial with Dante imagined at his writing desk, and Beatrice on the right-hand side.
John, can you focus? If I have completely failed to focus this, so perhaps you would be better at focusing it than me.
I will have a go.
I'm sorry if we're not able to show you this magnificent manuscript in its perfected form just yet. I mean, I could say a little bit more about the contents of this manuscript, in as much as it's, as John said, it's got it's a collection of Petrarch's Canzoniere, so Petrarch's lyric collection, and Dante's 15 canzoni di stesi at the end. So Dante is really kind of an appendage to this manuscript. It is really a Petrarch manuscript with Dante at the end, but it is nonetheless interesting, I think, because it's a super high status manuscript, isn't it? I mean, it's a really amazing manuscript.
This is a deluxe manuscript commissioned for a very wealthy aristocrat, very high production values. It's written on parchment, fine parchment or vellum, in a very fine humanist bookhand. We get the illuminated opening pages. There are 3 of them in total.
So this is the so sometimes people think this is Beatrice, so Dante's beloved Beatrice, but because this is the Canzoni di Stese, it's not actually Beatrice. It's probably the Donna Petrosa, the stony lady who rejected him. But all of the 3 typal pages have got a similar kind of mise en page, because the Petrarch pages also have the poet and his beloved. So it's very noticeable that there are very few signs of ownership, signs of readership, I should say, in this manuscript. It doesn't appear to have been particularly well used. It was a status symbol, perhaps something to be browsed through, shown off to your friends and pay clients, but not something that you would sort of sit up in bed reading at night. So there are very few underlinings or marginal annotations, and that contrasts with one of the manuscripts we're going to see in a minute, which has been heavily engaged with by a contemporary reader. I think, we should get that one up next, but could we maybe turn to the middle title page just before we, I shall do a Petrarchan detour. For Italianists who are listening, Petrarch's poetic collection is often divided into 2. It was divided into the in vita, so when the period when his beloved Laura was alive, and then the in morte, when she's dead. And this page is particularly interesting because this is the start of the in morte sequence. So you have her lying here on her funeral bier, and then the angel of death. So, you know, it's very much kind of targeted to the book, but it's also, you know, I just think these are really interesting kind of marginal details about the way that the poems are presented.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, should we bring on the Landy?
Yeah. Yeah. Another interesting observation about this manuscript, just while I'm swapping over, is it was purchased by Lord Crawford in 1859 from the sale of Guglielmo Libri, who was a notorious book thief. He plundered particularly French municipal libraries, although we are fairly confident that this manuscript has a legitimate provenance. By way of contrast, so this isn't a Crawford manuscript. This is a manuscript that was purchased by Enriqueta Rylands herself. Hopefully you can see the little presentation inscription. She gave it to the library in 1907, and she bought it in 1906 from Count Passerini. You can see his inscription on the left-hand side. He was a prodigious collector of all things Dante, and Enriqueta bought this vast collection, the Passerini collection, in 1906. So what we're looking at here is an early 15th century manuscript of the Divine Comedy. It's a scholar's manuscript rather than a deluxe connoisseur's manuscript. It's written on paper rather than parchment. It's written in a single column with very generous margins, with the specific intention that those margins would be filled with commentary and readers' annotations. And as we move through the manuscript, you will see that the commentary becomes even denser. So there, for example,
which section we are in this. I mean, this is a very dense opening. Sometimes the commentary tends to drop off in the Paradiso. No, this is the Paradiso, this section.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll just say a little bit about the page design. As John said, it's a single column layout. The poem, this is the text of the poem in the book hand here. You can see that the initial letters of each terzina, each 3-line unit, are set in to help the reader kind of navigate through the poem. It's set out like this to give the space for commentary. And this commentary is probably by the scribe that made it, although there are other hands in evidence in the manuscript as well. So as you can see on this opening, you know, every piece of real estate has been covered with commentary,
yeah.
and the commentaries sort of interact with each other as well. So, you know, you've got this bit up here talks to that bit, and there's even a little diagram here as well. I would just say at this point, I don't know if this has been put in the chat, but all of the books that we're showing today have been digitized and are available in the library collections. So you'll find a very full description of this manuscript, including links to the various pages in Manchester Digital Collections. So I think hopefully the team will put that in the chat for you.
Yeah. From a contemporary academic perspective, this is a much more interesting manuscript than the first one, because there's so much to explore in the commentary and the engagement of readers. And here we have the explicit. So this is the scribe signing off this particular section of the manuscript. So he's called Bartolomeo Landi de Landis de Prato. So he's from the city of Prato, and he's a notary, a notarium, and he completed it on the 29th of June in the year 1416. So we have a very specific date for when this manuscript was completed. But not content with that, he came back later and he added various other pieces, including works by Cicero. And there is a later commentary or explicit giving the date of December 1426. So 10 years later, he was still working on this text, and it's in a contemporary binding. So presumably, Bartolomeo Landi de Landis had this manuscript bound in its current form with some blind tooling and these rather plain utilitarian brass bosses. Books in the 15th century were stored flat on shelves rather than vertically, so the bosses were there for a practical purpose to protect the leather binding from abrasion on a shelf.
Can we go back to this page? I mean, this is just the most amazing Dante manuscript, because I mean, first of all, it's quite understudied. It's been noted, but it's not really been worked over yet in the way that many of the other kind of iconic early manuscripts have. But it's just a kind of map of a man's mind, you know, it's his engagement with the poem, but it's also very expressive of a certain kind of scholarly reader, a professional writer, he's a notaio, and the way in which he would engage with the poem and other similar works. I mean, the layout of the poem is really typical. It's like many manuscripts from the period. But if you look at the different works, you can see that they have different layouts. So the kind of the genre of the text is reflected in the way it's designed on the page. Yeah. But this is the very end of the poem here. So you can see the very last words. And each one of the three cantic, each one of the three books of the Commedia ends with the word stars. So this is the final one where it says stelle.
Yeah, great.
Okay, have we got, do 5 minutes on the red one? I have very professional you know, names for these manuscripts. So that was Italian manuscript 49, and the next one that we've got is Italian manuscript 2, and this is a kind of middle range manuscript, which is sort of, I think, situated somewhere between, not chronologically, but in terms of kind of author readership and production, between the kind of Strozzi manuscripts and the Dante.
Yeah, and the date of this manuscript is the second half of the 15th century, so we are in the period of printing now. And there is a suggestion, in fact, that this particular manuscript was a copy of the 1477 printed edition that we're going to have a look at shortly. In terms of the selection of text, there are strong similarities. If we start at with the binding, it's in a 16th century red leather binding with some quite pretty decorations, some book furniture, as it's called, and again, the blind tooling. If we open the manuscript, we have book plates which have indications of provenance. So Tolomei Gucci, the Gucci family of Florence. This is the book plate of the Earls of Crawford, the Bibliotheca Lindesiana. Lord Lindsay, the 25th Earl of Crawford, bought it at Baron Seymour Kirkup's sale in 1871. Seymour Kirkup was an expat Englishman living in Florence. He was one of the great promoters of the Renaissance revival in the 19th century, built up a fantastic collection which was sold in 1871. So again, this is Lord Lindsay engaging directly in that emulation of the Florentine elite. So this is, as Guida says, a sort of medium range manuscript. It has some significant features that indicate a sort of refinement, the hierarchy of decoration, the initial letters that have been tricked out in yellow. But it's written on paper. It's not a particularly fine bookhand.
But it's better than, you can tell that
Yes.
it's professionally produced because the script is a very regular bookhand, whereas what we see from the previous manuscript, that it's a kind of, it's the notarial hand,
Yeah.
isn't it? So,
Yeah.
So this one has been designed. I mean, obviously the Landi manuscript was designed, and it was designed by its scribe and commentator, but this is a more conventional and standardized book design.
Yeah. The book was, as I say, was bound in the 16th century, and clearly at that time, the book binder, as so often, was rather clumsy and cropped the page. So you can see here at the top of the right-hand column on the left-hand page, the scribe missed 3 lines. This is a very common error in scribal copying. Your eye will skip, and the scribe inserted these 3 missing lines at the top of the column, and then the binder later on cropped quite heavily. So we've lost pretty much all of the first additional line. There are a few signs of engagement by early readers. So we have an inscription here at the bottom of the left-hand page. Occasional corrections. But yeah, this is a manuscript that we feel is in emulation of a printed book, and it's interesting to speculate why somebody would have gone to the trouble of copying a printed book.
I mean, I think it's. I wanted to say a little bit about the paratext of this edition. So it's got quite a lot. It's got a suite of supporting material around Dante's poem, and there are similarities, particularly with the paratext at the end, with the printed edition that we're going to conclude with today. I don't think it's certainly not an exact copy of the first printed edition with paratext, but there are some quite rare shared texts. So what this book has, it has an introductory summary before each of the 3 books of the Commedia. So the first one is by Jacopo Alighieri, who you might guess is related to Dante. It's Dante's son. On here, then there's one before the Purgatorio by Bosoni da Gubbio, and an anonymous one before the Paradiso. And at the end of the book is a sort of sequence of devotional lyrics or prayers, if you like, which are quite often associated with the poem in this period. So again, it's kind of like back matter that's still relevant and on the same kind of afterlife theme. So I think it is interesting as an example of a kind of more elaborated presentation of Dante, which we didn't see in the previous manuscript, because that was a kind of a single reader commentating it. I'm trying to think of anything else I need to say about the design. Just it's a very Florentine manuscript. And one thing that, as a Boccaccio person, I think it's always important to bring in kind of Boccaccio to the Dante editorial tradition, because he was his, basically his first and best editor. But these little initial letters that you see here at the start of each terzina with the yellow wash, it's a feature of something that Boccaccio did in his own autograph manuscripts about a century before. Okay, so should we rattle through the 1477?
Yeah.
So the last book that we're going to show you is a printed edition. It's the 1477 edition of the Commedia, which is printed in Venice, it was edited by Cristoforo Berardi, and it was printed by Wendelin of Speyer, Vindelino da Spira. So this is the first printed edition with commentarial material. And the editions printed up to this date just had the poem itself in a very plain presentation, mostly in a 1-column presentation. Some have got a 2-column presentation. This one has got a 2-column presentation, which is very much the kind of scholarly folio format. But it's particularly interesting because it has a life of Dante. It's preceded by a biography of the poet, and then it has additional material around the Cantiche, and then it also has a commentary. So I will begin with the life of Dante because this is the life of Dante that was written by Boccaccio. So Boccaccio prepared, I think, at least 3 autographed manuscripts of Dante's poem, more or less extended with paratextual material. So this book is really interesting because it's a kind of historicized Dante. It's printed in the kind of the last quarter of the 15th century, but it has an early biography of him. I think the Trattatello, the Life of Dante, was probably thought to its first evidence about the 1350s. And it has a commentary. Do you want to move to a page? I'll let you do it. I don't want to wreck the book on camera. No. So the commentary follows the poem. It's probably a few pages in, actually, if we just... so you have the text of the Commedia followed by a vernacular commentary on it, which was done by Jacopo della Lana. It's attributed to Benvenuto da Imola, who was another 14th century commentator, but it's actually misattributed to him. I think if we just go to there, we can. Yeah. So I'll show you the first page of the Commedia, which is a very spectacular presentation of the start of the poem. That's just the summary rubrics. Yeah, so here what we've got is the start of the poem. It's got gilding, the initial N for nel mezzo, so in the middle of the path of our life. It's got incredible fine penwork ornament down the side. It has a little, Latin inscription at the top. Various kind of ownerships inscriptions. There's questo libro di Giovanni, di Simone, di Francesco, di Piero Berti. And then a marginal annotation as well. So this is 2 columns of Dante's poem. Again, you see the kind of initial letter that's set out for navigation. And then the commentary begins here. So the commentary is also marked by this penwork. So not quite as grand as the poem. It doesn't have the gilding, but it's got that kind of penwork on it.
Later editions managed to frame the poem with the commentary. And this edition has gone for a much simpler arrangement of poem. Commentary.
I think even from the next one, the poem is sort of swallowed up in this sea of kind of, it's surrounded by the commentary, but this one is still quite linear.
I hope we're capturing the sound of the paper.
The creaking of the book. I mean, we have 2 copies of this book actually in Manchester. So this is the kind of fancier of the 2. The other one is water damaged, and that's the one that I did the kind of sound recording of as part of the Cities. I'll just pre-trail tomorrow's Cities of Memories sound project event. But the sound of these books is just incredible, really. It's a full 360-degree, 4-dimensional sensory experience.
Yeah. This is the Spencer copy, we should say. So we have, as Dante says, we have 2 copies. The Spencer copy typically is the finer copy. Lord Spencer always wanted the best copies, largest margins, most highly illuminated, cleanest copies. Occasionally, he would go to the extent of having copies perfected. If he had an imperfect copy of a book with pages missing, he would sometimes complete them by borrowing or appropriating pages from other copies. He would also sometimes have pages washed if they were a bit grubby, which for us is rather unfortunate because sometimes that erases traces of early readership.
Yeah, so this is the start of the Purgatorio. So again, you've got that kind of large gilded initial letter for the poem. So it's Percorrere miglior acque. Again, the sort of introductory, decoration that signals where you are in the text. Could we maybe just look at the colophon just to finish? Because then we've got time for questions. So this is the first, the first printed edition, and it's the time when the form is being worked out. And the kind of closing formulas of this book are really interesting because they have, is it here? So we've got the poem ends a little bit. So this is the end of the Paradiso, or is this this is the supporting material, isn't it? This one has also got additional poems. Yeah, the colophon is here. There's just before the colophon, there's a poem in praise of Dante that says Dante Alighieri Son Minerva Oscura, which is kind of a fairly famous poem which does accompany Dante's works in some traditions. It's not written by Boccaccio, although sometimes it was attributed to Boccaccio. The colophon is here, and if you see, it's laid out like a poem. It's not quite terza rima, but there's a sort of attempt to rhyme, I suppose. But it says the people who are involved. So it says Cristofal Berardi. I can't read it. So the editor is named here first, and then it says Despiere Vendolin fu il stampatore. So the printer is also named. So that's
the printer was one of a whole cohort of German printers who moved south in the 1460s, 1470s. And set up presses throughout Italy and adapted their typography to local styles of bookhand.
This is the most kind of Gothic-y looking printed commedia. Actually, it's got that kind of sort of Italic Gothic side. Most of the others are printed in Roman, and they have a much kind of less cramped and kind of more open appearance. I think, I mean, should we just open to questions? I think I don't have a kind of grand flourish to finish, apart from look at these amazing books, see how they're designed differently. So we can take any questions if there are any. Hi, Hannah.
Hi guys, thank you. That was so interesting. We do have questions, and if you have other questions, please ask them now on the question and answer or the chat, and then I'll ask them for you. Can I get in first with a question? And it may take you back to that opening you just had. I want to know about something about the annotations in this particular volume and what kinds of annotations they are. The last page you were showing looked to be a Bible verse to me.
Yes.
I couldn't see it. What is it? Sorry to put you on the spot, guys, but
we know, we prepped for this, Hannah.
What is that Bible verse, and how does it relate to the text, for example? Is this someone being inspired by this text or something else?
Well, it is a quotation from Proverbs 30. It's in Latin. Not
you can handle the Latin.
Yeah,
John.
well,
I'm a very
with the help of Google
and the description. It's a book.
So the book is fully digitized, as Guido explained, and we have a really rich description of the book on Manchester Digital Collections. So I can claim no credit, but what the inscription says in English is 3 things are insatiable, and the 4th, which never says enough. Infernus, which I think means hell, os vulvae, which I think politely is translated as a barren womb, and a land which is never quenched by water or satiated by water, and fire never says enough. So it doesn't seem to be tied to any particular part of the text. So I don't think we know why a particular reader was inspired.
I mean, it's a biblical reference to hell, isn't it? I suppose so. It's kind of it's sort of lightly related, but I mean, I've never kind of found the bit it refers to. I mean, other editions have got, they will have specific quotations placed beside parts of the text, so you can see kind of intertextual references model, but this one is a little bit enigmatic to us. But a good question, Hannah. What do you think?
Lovely. Well, I love a scribble in a book. Megan asks, how have students engaged with these manuscripts? Have they been used in recent teaching and learning at Manchester?
Yes, so we've been teaching with these books for, I don't know, for years actually. It's absolutely fantastic. It's something that I was never able to do before I came to Manchester, and it was just such, it was amazing to come here and to work with John and all of the library staff, the generations of library staff who've come since I've came here, because I've been here so long. But I teach a course on the kind of cultural history of the Divine Comedy, but taught materially. So it's the poem from manuscript through to video games. And the students, so we will do a close-up session in Deansgate with manuscripts. The students can, see the different kinds of manuscripts, and then with the printed books. And then the students typically will sort of adopt a book and write their own case study on it. I mean, they're not allowed to take them out of the library, but they'll have their own book which they research and write their own kind of essay. And we've been able to use the years of student work on this, because so many of our discoveries have been made by our Italian students, which is then fed into the metadata around the around the books, and which is now in Manchester Digital Collections. And one thing that was really amazing, actually, when I did the first curator tour for this exhibition, was several past students came back and were reunited with their books in the exhibition.
Yeah.
So I think people have really personal relationships with the Dantes.
We even did a really pioneering project about 10 years ago on using augmented reality to support students in engaging with the text. Because what we do is, apart from a mediated teaching session, the students are encouraged to study these objects in the reading room on their own. And that can be quite a scary experience if you're a third-year undergraduate. So the idea of augmented reality was that they could focus in on a particular part of the book, and Guida's voice would echo out of the
it was just it was a pilot. I don't know. I don't think we used my voice. I think we might have. I did some videos, but I would hate to be the soundtrack to it. But we probably got somebody else's voice.
It was a brilliant project, slightly ahead of its time in that the technology required Wi-Fi infrastructure, but we didn't actually have in the building at the time.
Yes, that is the problem of working in a building with very thick walls, is it not? Susanna asks, how does it feel to deconstruct a book in the way you have done in the exhibition and today in this presentation, to have such an in-depth knowledge of its design and the way it has evolved through the centuries? I think Susanna's saying, how does it feel to be an academic? And why do you think it's important to transmit this knowledge to others? Why do we care about Dante now?
It feels great. It's amazing. You know, I mean, when I was an undergraduate, quite a long time ago, you know, we studied the text. You know, we lived in the universe of the text. And what's been really amazing for me is as I've become a researcher, is to re-encounter the text as an object, and to see the kind of just the physical history of the book is really interesting. The kind of materiality, the people's interacting with it as an object, and the ways in which the poem has been made over time. So, you know, it's an absolute pleasure to put it in an exhibition and take it to bits. And I also think it's quite interesting to sort of demystify Dante, who is a bit of a kind of, you know, he's a monument in and of himself. But I think if we focus on the material objects, we see more of the lives of the people that have encountered the book as well. So it's a kind of rebalancing, I think, away from the author function, which I think is important. John? I
think it's also important that students understand when they're reading a text on their ebook or on their phone, that it has a history. The text of Dante has come down to us through generation upon generation of manuscript and printed edition and the work of scholars like Guida. It isn't just something that's magicked up out of thin air.
But I think it's also really important that when they're reading the text on their phone or their devices or whatever, that they also see those as, you know, materialized reading tools, and that they themselves are part of this. You know, I think there are a lot of breakthroughs. We've like, oh my God, I never thought of it like that. You know, so they see themselves in a long history of technology and reading.
Polly's asked a question which the Rylands team have answered privately, but I think it would be nice to have a public response to this, which is, can we see these digitally? And the answer is that you can. Over the summer, we'll have a Dante collection on our digital platform, Manchester Digital Collection. So come back, Polly, and look at those then, and you will be able to see them.
Sorry, Hannah. All 4 of these are available now.
So great, thank you.
We have 6 Dantes in Manchester Digital Collections. We've got a small collection now.
There you go, Polly. Knock yourself out with Dante.
If Polly would like to come and see the books themselves in person, obviously there are books that are kind of being kept under glass in the exhibitions, but then readers can come and come and visit the books. You know, come and commune with Dante in person.
No, absolutely. That's what libraries are all about. Jeanette asks, John, this can be one for you. Does the library still actively collect Dante materials?
We do indeed. I can't, off the top of my head, remember the details of the last 16th century edition that we bought.
Was it the Rampazzetti, maybe? I think Julianne
Simpson, who is our
Simpson will tell us.
Supremo of rare books and collections generally, keeps her eye out, a beady eye out for missing items, or not missing, but items that would help to complement the collection, particularly the earlier ones. I mean, it's not very often that for example, a 16th century edition comes up that we don't already have. But we might buy a duplicate if it was a particularly interesting copy full of annotations, for example, or a particularly interesting provenance. So we are actively collecting, and well, I will provide the information to Jeanette about the specific item we last
Oh, Julianne has provided
John,
it.
yeah, Julianne
Oh.
beaten you to
Oh,
it.
brilliant,
Said
Julianne.
this week you purchased a London edition from 1827.
Julianne went on a spending spree at the Chelsea Book Fair last weekend.
Jolly good. That sounds like a perfect way to spend your time. This will be our last question, I think, from Susan Mentis. Do the Colorfunds provide information on the materials, paper, type of ink, script, etc.?
The short answer is no. Colorfunds are usually quite short. They're often, sometimes the scribe will declare who they are, give a date of completion, often say, thank goodness this task is over.
Deo gratias.
But yeah, information about paper, type of ink, script, etc. is derived from by modern scholars and curators from their knowledge of the materiality, rather than it being explicitly declared.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and I think with Manchester Digital Collections, our new image viewer, because it's been explicitly designed to give a kind of facing page presentation, so you can view the object and you can also read about the object, which means that, you know, the viewer can kind of learn about it. And so we've really kind of amplified the amount of information available for each one of the books.
Thank you so much, Guida and John. That was so interesting. Thank you, Julianne, for feeding in your information as well. I'd just like to point out that Julianne does not have beady eyes. She has beautiful eyes. But brilliant questions as well from people who were listening in online. Thank you so much for those. Our next planned seminar is being postponed. So the last one of the series will be on the 19th of May, Kevin Morgan and Jeanette Martin on the love and glory of his people, Victor Hugo as political symbol. But as I said, you will be able to listen to Jerome Briard talking about gardening in the autumn. And also, I should say, the seminar that also had to be postponed, Hannah Barker and Jane Gallagher talking about scribbling in old books. Believe me, you won't want to miss that one. You can find more details about these seminars on the What's On page on the Rylands website, and you can register there from the Eventbrite link. So you'll be able to join us in 2 weeks' time if you register for Kevin Morgan and Jeanette Martin, and then later on in the autumn. Thanks again, guys. That was brilliant.